And by means of the Buddha's spiritual power, Mahamati Bodhisattva asked the Buddha, Bhagwan, your proclamation of what neither arises nor ceases is not unique. And why not? Because there are other schools whose causes neither arise nor cease. Also, the Bhagwan teaches that the realms of space, non-analytic cessation, and nirvana neither arise nor cease. Bhagwan, other schools teach that every world arises from causes, while the Bhagwan teaches that every world arises from the conditions of ignorance, desire, karma, and projection. But the causes of the one and the conditions of the other are merely different words. The same is true for the causes and conditions of external objects, for which there is no difference between the explanations of the Bhagwan and those of other schools. Instead of their 9 things that neither arise nor cease, such as elementary particles, a first cause, a paramount power, or a creator, the Bhagwan also teaches that whatever exists neither arises nor ceases because its existence or non-existence cannot be determined. Other schools also teach that the 4 elements are indestructible, that their essential nature neither arises nor ceases, that they are eternal, and that the 4 elements extend everywhere without losing their essential nature. What the Bhagwan teaches is also like this, which is why I said it was not unique. I hope the Bhagwan can explain how it differs, how it is unique, and how it excels that of other schools. But if there isn't any difference, then the teachers of other schools must also be Buddhas based on their teaching of what neither arises nor ceases. The Bhagwan has said it is impossible for multiple Buddhas to appear in the world at the same time. But according to the foregoing, if there isn't any difference, there would be multiple Buddhas at the same time. The Buddha told Mahamati, my teaching of what neither arises nor ceases is not the same as the teaching of what neither arises nor ceases taught by members of other schools. And how so? According to these members of other schools, there is something that exists that has the characteristics of neither arising nor changing. Mind does not fall prey to such categories as existence or non-existence. Mahamati, mind transcends the categories of existence and non-existence. It is not subject to arising or ceasing. Neither does it exist, nor does it not exist. It does not exist because it appears just as an illusion or a dream does. But then how does it not exist? Because form lacks any perceptible characteristics of self-existence, it appears but does not appear. It is perceived but is not perceived. Therefore whatever exists neither exists nor does not exist. Once you realize it is nothing but the perception of your own mind, its projections do not arise, you dwell in peace and happiness, and worldly concerns cease. What ignorant and foolish people do is give rise to projections, but not the wise. Projections are not real, like cities of Gandharvas or their conjured residents. Mahamati. Foolish people imagine their conjured residents, such as merchants and shopkeepers, entering and leaving those Gandharvan cities, and that they really enter and leave, when, in fact, no one enters or leaves. It is merely due to their projections. Likewise, Mahamati, the confusion foolish people give rise to about what neither arises nor ceases is neither created nor not created. It is like the appearance of conjured beings. In truth, nothing arises or ceases. There is no existence or non-existence. This is true of all things. They neither arise nor cease. Foolish people fall prey to falsehood and give rise to projections of arising and ceasing, but not the wise. What is false is not so, and it is no different with the projection of self-existence. Though projections seem to be different, they are attachments to the self-existence of things due to not seeing clearly. Those who do not see clearly never get free of projections. Therefore, Mahamati, seeing what has no form is better than not seeing what has form. Seeing what has form is the cause of rebirth. Hence, it isn't better. Mahamati, where there is no form, projections do not arise. What neither arises nor ceases is what I call nirvana. Mahamati, nirvana is to see the meaning of what is truly so and to get free from the net of thoughts of previous projections. To attain the personal realization of the noble knowledge of a Tathagata, this is what I call nirvana. 78. The Bhagwan then repeated the meaning of this in verse. To refute the doctrine of arising. To establish the truth of non-arising, I explain this teaching. Fools can't understand. Although things don't arise, they don't exist as nothing. As Gandharvan cities, illusions, or dreams. They exist but without a cause. Why don't things arise or exist by themselves? Why are they empty? Because apart from combinations, nothing appears to wisdom. Thus I teach what is empty. What doesn't arise and is not self-existent. When this and that combine, something appears but doesn't exist. Analysis finds no combination. Despite what other schools claim. As dreams, illusions, or strands of hair. Mirages or Gandharvan cities. Such are the things of the world. They appear but without a cause. To refute doctrines of causation, I proclaim the truth of non-arising. Because I proclaim non-arising, the Dharma continues unbroken. But the radiance of no causation frightens the followers of other paths. Mahamati then asked in verse, how and caused by what? And why do things arise? And how do they come together? According to this doctrine of no causation? The Bhagavan then replied in verse, when created things are examined as neither having nor not having a cause, the doctrine of arising and cessation is undone by what one sees. Mahamati then asked in verse, does non-arising mean non-existence? Or does it wait upon a cause? A name should not mean nothing. Could you please explain? The Bhagavan then replied in verse, non-arising isn't due to non-existence. Nor does it wait upon a cause. Nor does a name mean something exists. Nor does a name have no meaning. Beyond the reach of other paths. Pratyekabuddhas and Shravakas. Beyond the 7 stages. This is the realm of non-arising. Beyond causes and conditions. Likewise beyond all actions. Resting on nothing but mind. This I say is non-arising. Things not arising from causes. Neither existing nor not existing. Beyond perceiver and perceived. This I say is non-arising. He mind without an object. Beyond the 2 modes of reality. Transforming one's very ground. This I say is non-arising. No external existence or non-existence. No grasping by the mind. Putting an end to every view. This I say is non-arising. When something is thus distinguished as empty and without self-existence, it isn't empty because it's empty. It's empty because it doesn't arise. When causes and conditions combine, something arises and something ceases. Aside from causes and conditions, nothing else arises or ceases. Aside from causes and conditions, there isn't something else that exists. Something the same or different. Despite what other schools say, existence or non-existence doesn't arise. There is no existence or non-existence. Except when combinations change. Neither of these apply. It is only according to convention. Mutual dependence becomes a chain. Apart from the chain of causation, arising has no meaning. Arising doesn't arise if it doesn't exist. The error of other paths is thus avoided. I only speak of a chain of causation. When fools can't understand. As for something else arising, apart from the chain of causation, this is the doctrine of no causation, which denies the meaning of the chain. Just as a lamp illuminates forms, perception of the chain does the same. Thus apart from the chain, something else would exist. What doesn't arise doesn't exist. Its existence is like that of space. Apart from the chain of causation, the wise find nothing to see. But there is something that doesn't arise. Something attained by the wise. The arising of which doesn't arise. The forbearance of non-arising. If in every world, whatever you see is a chain. Everything is a chain. From this you will attain samadhi. Ignorance, desire, and karma. These are the interior chain. A bow drill, a lump of clay, a wheel, and seeds make up the outsides. If something else existed, something arising from causes, this would negate the chain's meaning, and thus it wouldn't succeed. If something arose that didn't exist, which link would be its cause? Things give rise to each other. This is what causation means. Solidity, moisture, heat, and movement. These are the projections of fools. Nothing else exists but their combinations. Thus I teach no self-existence. Like doctors who treat diseases, don't have particular doctrines. Because diseases differ, they prescribe different cures. For the sake of other beings, to rid them of afflictions, I gauge their level of understanding before I decide what to teach. But different afflictions and understandings don't mean different teachings. I only teach one path, the path of the Mahayana. 79. Mahamati Bodhisattva once more asked the Buddha, followers of other paths all give rise to projections of impermanence. The Bhagwan also teaches that all phenomena are impermanent, that they arise and they cease. What does this mean? Is this wrong? Or is this right? And how many kinds of impermanence are there? The Buddha told Mahamati, followers of other paths have 7 kinds of impermanence, none of which are taught by me. And what are the 7? Some say impermanence is when something is created and then abandoned. Some say impermanence is the destruction of shape. Some say impermanence is form. Some say impermanence is the process during which form changes and that because it involves an uninterrupted dissolution, like the transformation of milk to curds, the process of change is imperceptible but that impermanence destroys whatever is there. Some say impermanence is something that exists. Some say impermanence is something that exists and does not exist. And some say impermanence is something that does not arise but is inherent in all phenomena. Mahamati. According to impermanence as something that exists and does not exist, the individual characteristics of the 4 elements and what they comprise are destroyed, but the self-existence of the 4 elements is imperceptible and does not arise. According to impermanence as something that does not arise, neither the existence nor non-existence of anything arises, and even the most careful analysis yields nothing, neither permanence nor impermanence. This is the meaning of what does not arise, not of what does arise. This is what characterizes impermanence as something that does not arise. Those who don't understand this fall prey to the view of followers of other paths that impermanence is something that arises. Mahamati, as for impermanence being something that exists, this is a projection of one's own mind and not of the existence of permanence or impermanence. What does this mean? It means that the existence of impermanence itself is not destroyed. Mahamati, the non-existence of what exists is the result of impermanence. Except for impermanence, there is nothing that can cause what exists not to exist. It is like a club or a roof tile or a rock. It breaks things. Clearly it is no different for anything else. For in terms of existence and impermanence, there is no difference between cause and effect. If this is impermanence, and this is the effect, and there is no difference between cause and effect, then everything that exists would be permanent, as nothing would exist as a cause. Mahamati, the non-existence of what exists does have a cause, but not one fools are aware of. A cause does not produce an unrelated effect. If it did, anything that exists could be impermanence. And if the effect were unrelated, there would be no difference between cause and effect, even though they were clearly different. In the case of impermanence as something that exists, this would amount to the existence of an effect-producing cause. But if that were so, whatever exists would never end. If everything that exists amounted to an effect-producing cause, then impermanence itself would be impermanent. And because impermanence would be impermanent, everything that exists would not be impermanent but permanent. As for impermanence being inherent in whatever exists, this is contradicted by the 3 periods of time. Either it is destroyed along with past forms, or it does not arise in the future because such forms do not arise, or it is destroyed along with present forms. Forms are different combinations of the four elements, and the essential nature of the four elements and what they comprise is not subject to destruction, as it neither varies nor does it not vary. But while according to followers of other paths, the four elements are indestructible, it is common knowledge that the four elements and all the forms they comprise throughout the three realms arise and cease to exist. Where then do the followers of such paths conceive of impermanence as existing apart from the four elements and what they comprise if the four elements do not arise and their essential nature is not subject to destruction? As for impermanence existing apart from initial creation, there are no other four elements than the four elements because among the individual characteristics of their different characteristics, no differences can be found. Since they don't differ, they don't create something that does. This kind of impermanence, you should know, involves the non-arising of dualities. As for impermanence being the destruction of shape, this means that the four elements and what they comprise are not destroyed. They are never destroyed. Mahamati. If one analyzes objects into the finest particles, one observes their destruction, as the shapes of the four elements and what they comprise cannot avoid appearing to differ in terms of their dimensions. But this is not true of the four elements. The four elements are not destroyed. It is the shapes that appear to be destroyed. This falls under the doctrine of the Samkhyas. As for impermanence consisting in form, this means form itself is impermanence. But what is impermanent are shapes, not the four elements. If the four elements were impermanent, this would deny worldly convention. The denial of worldly convention falls under the doctrines of the Lokayatas, who view whatever exists as nothing but words and individual characteristics as not arising. As for impermanence consisting in change, this means that the existence of form appears to differ, not the four elements. For example, when we use gold to make ornaments, its appearance changes, but the nature of gold is not destroyed. It is only the ornaments that are subject to destruction. Thus, changes in whatever else exists are also like this. Such are the various views of impermanence held by followers of other paths who imagine that when fire destroys the four elements, their individual characteristics are not destroyed. If their individual characteristics were destroyed, the four elements and what they comprise would cease to exist. Mahamati, my teaching is that what arises is neither permanent nor impermanent. And how so? Because external existence cannot be determined, I teach that the three realms are nothing but mind and do not teach the arising or ceasing of their different characteristics. As for the four elements coming together and differentiating, the four elements and what they comprise are projections of the duality of subject and object. By understanding that dualistic views are projections, one gets free from the dualistic views of external existence and non-existence, and one sees them as nothing but perceptions of one's own mind. Projections arise when you think about doing something, not when you do nothing. Avoid projections of the existence or non-existence of the mind. All mundane, metaphysical, and transcendent dharmas are neither permanent nor impermanent. Those who fail to perceive them as merely perceptions of their own mind end up attached to erroneous, dualistic views. But because followers of other paths do not perceive them as their own projections, such fools have no means by which to know that all mundane, metaphysical, and transcendent dharmas are the result of their own projection of words. This is not something fools are aware of. The Bhagwan then repeated the meaning of this in verse. Something separate from what is created. Differences of shape. Impermanence of form or existence. These are what other schools see. In the indestructibility of what exists. The persistence of the elements. Other schools see impermanence. Immersed in a myriad views. For all such schools as these, there is no arising or cessation. But if the elements last forever, what does impermanence mean? Everything is nothing but mind. From this dualities flow. Among the grasping and the grasped, there is no self or its possessions. From Brahma's heaven to the roots of trees, throughout their world encircling branches. What I teach is this. It is all nothing but mind. Chapter 3. We hear more about what distinguishes Buddhahood and the path leading thereto, with the Buddha taking the lead and Mahamati continuing to ask questions. Section LVII. The Buddha doesn't wait for a question but explains one of the fruits of the Bodhisattva path. The transformation of the body. Earlier, in sections XXX and Li, he linked attainment of a projection body to the 8th stage of the path. Here, he identifies 3 kinds of such bodies. One attained prior to the 8th stage that realizes the nature of mind. One attained at the 8th stage that realizes the nature of dharmas, and one that realizes the nature of realization and is not associated with any stage, although it could be linked with any or all of the final 3 stages. The ocean here represents the 8th, or repository, consciousness, while the waves represent the other 7 forms of consciousness. While emptiness is often listed as the essential nature of all dharmas, in the foregoing sections emphasis is placed on non-arising and illusoriness. This is the Lankavatara's solution to spiritual cultivation in light of the absence of a self. In these 2 verses, the Buddha keeps a foot on either side of the path. Self-realization and the liberation of others. Section Layin. Besides transformation of body, another fruit of the path is transformation of deed. Here the Buddha reinterprets